And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Press box, Spartan Stadium. A few hours after Michigan State's 20-17 victory, upset victory over Nebraska. It's still daylight here in mid-Michigan. It's strange to come out of a post-game press conference and it be daylight for the first time this season. And strangely, the first time in, I think, 9 weeks after a 6-game losing streak. Michigan State with a victory. Very happy group of college athletes enjoying this day together. Paul Konyndyk.
Yeah, and I'm not sure some people at home don't care. Honestly, they've checked out at this point. But for those guys in the locker room, they deserve that win. They've continued to use the old Mel Tucker term, keep chopping. But they've ground, they fought every single week, got off the mat, and they deserve to get rewarded. I was watching the Lions earlier this week, as a lot of people were. Dan Campbell was talking about how much he appreciated some of the bad teams that they had that just kept on fighting and doing what they could and overachieving. And this Michigan State team beat a good Nebraska team, a good defensive Nebraska team, and they did so in a situation where it felt eerily similar to some of their losses, and they found a way to win games in the past they've lost, and that's progress.
That is progress. Michigan State did not make the big mistake today. No turnovers. Had a couple of bobbles on special teams, but nothing catastrophic. And this team, if they don't crap the bed on special teams and they have no turnovers, they can beat teams like Nebraska and Minnesota and Iowa and Rutgers and Maryland. Those other 4 they lost. They weren't good enough from top to bottom to button away victories in those games. But these guys, we're talking to Maverick Hansen and some of these players. Yeah, they're 3-6. They're having a bad season. It's going to be it's going to go down as a bad season. But they don't feel like they're a bad team. They feel like they're better than the record. That doesn't mean anything to anyone else. But that's part of the reason why inside the locker room they've been able to repeatedly come back out, practice well all week, put forth a good effort. Play well on defense against the Big Ten's best statistical rushing attack. I don't really think they are the best, but statistically they are in terms of yards per game and yards per carry. Contained them, make a mediocre quarterback beat you. Couldn't do it. Michigan State comes out. They had the mistake in the man-to-man when they gave up the 43-yard keeper, which made this thing closer at the end than it needed to be. But the players, they know they're not a great team, but they know they're not a bad team, and they showed it today. And they'll try to build off this, maybe beat Indiana down the road, try to be competitive in the other 2 games against top 10 opponents. I don't know if Penn State's still in the top 10, top 15 opponents, and feel that they've got proof that they're not a bad team. They'll be watching Nebraska in a bowl game in a few weeks, and they'll know they're better than Nebraska.
Well, here's the thing. I think sometimes you mentioned that they feel like they're a better team than they are because it is like a special teams area here or there. I think sometimes that's harder. I think it's really hard for a defense, when you're losing players and when you're down to your last guy, to keep on saddling up and hitting hard every single week and keeping on grinding when you don't feel like the offense is doing its part. They're not going to say that, but I'm sure they obviously feel that way. When the special teams aren't doing their part, it's really tough to play a collision sport and continue to do those things, the selfless things that you have to do to win football games. But they did that today, and that defense especially. I know the offense did just enough to win, and that was great. And the special teams, in a lot of ways, the punting game was a good thing. They did some really good things kicking wise. I thought operationally they were good. They didn't have a lot of penalties and that type of stuff, but they kept the Jonathan Kim obviously with the kickoffs. They kept the ball out of any kind of a return type situation. But the defense today, there's a couple times where he leaned over to me and said, "Hey, they're going to give up a lot of rushing yards," because they were in those situations where they're giving up 10, 11, 12 yards, 8 on certain carries, and it was like little tiny mistakes, where a guy wouldn't keep the edge. You get sucked inside, and all of a sudden a 3rd and 10, where you should have easily been off the field, ends up being a first down, and then gets some more. You saw that a few times today, but they kept on fighting and they kept on scrapping, and a lot of it was seniors making plays, but nobody. The plays that they made weren't like really heroic plays. where guys were just doing something crazy. It was guys that were doing their job in coverage, guys on the interior defensive line being in spots where they needed to be, and other guys pursuing and cleaning up. It was, when Dyron Reynolds, defensive line coach, earlier this week said, hey, we just need to do our job, you saw a lot of that today on defense, and that was a step forward for those guys. And that run defense in the fourth quarter, they gave up the 43-yarder on man-to-man. Part of that is the coverage, right? I mean, it's susceptible to that. And in Harburg, the one thing that he does do is he can get out there and scramble a little bit. And so I'm wondering, like you and I both probably feel the same way about this. Maybe it wouldn't have been a great idea to be in man-to-man, especially when you're trying to burn clock. You kind of gave them the one out that you could give them, and so a coach can say, yeah, well, we got beaten man-to-man in that situation. Well, you didn't have to put him in that because zone was working. And so I wonder about that. But at the end of the day, Michigan State found a way to win, and the defense did a really nice job, because one of the things that Nebraska wants to do to opponents is their magic number in the fourth quarter is 75 rushing yards. That's the goalpost every week for them. They want to get at least 75 rushing yards in that fourth quarter. They got 37 today. Some of that was sack related, where some of the yardage were taken off. But Michigan State took a huge step forward overall in the whole defensive operation. I thought they played well together as a defense.
Yeah, that quarterback keeper for 43 yards or whatever in man-to-man, you and I were talking about that. One or two plays, maybe one snap earlier, Michigan State played, cover 4, soft zone, one of the softer zones all day. Gave up like an 18-yarder on an in, but you're up by 10 with 4 minutes to go. I'm not saying prevent defense, but man-to-man not only gives up that quarterback keeper, which you don't expect is going to happen, in terms of, well, if we play man-to-man, but I'll rewind here a second. If you play man-to-man, you are susceptible to a quarterback keeper. A long one like that, well, that guy had like a 70-yarder against somebody else this year too. He doesn't have much burst or agility, but when he gets going in a straight line, you see that he has speed. We wrote about that in pre-snap read, and that's when long quarterback runs come, is in man-to-man. And I think it might have been press man-to-man. So up 10 with 4 minutes to go, you are playing a coverage that, percentage-wise, you might think that you've got the best chance to cover them, but it's also, the other side of that coin is, it's a defense that's more likely to give up a slant and go for a big gain also. They just played zone the one snap before that. If the game had turned on that play and they would have lost, I would have a hard time swallowing that particular decision. That opened up the game to be tight down the stretch, but I'm sure they had other reasons why they did it that way, but they survived it.
And this is something we've seen. There's been other times this year where they've been caught in man-to-man in the fourth quarter. I understand some of it if you kind of spring it unexpectedly, but you're talking about the one thing that guy can do, in terms of what your quarterback can do, and I think that did them a favor. To Michigan State's credit, they bounced back, and the defensive line today played the front seven today collectively played their best game overall, and there's a couple times where like guys like Zion Young were out of position and that hurt them, and I expect more from him.
Yeah, he wasn't quite setting the edge on one of those plays. Maybe those blockers are better than I think, but he's had last week he played sick for a half and wasn't quite himself. He needs to snap back here the last couple of weeks and play like he can.
Right, and Chris Bowles been playing hurt this year. He's been playing hurt, and he came in like after Zion Young gave up that 3rd and 10, or maybe after that 3rd and 10 he gave up by not being out there on the edge. He also missed a tackle on the touchdown run. So after that you saw more of guys like Bogle and Wright out there, and those guys kind of no pun intended, but righted the ship.
Yeah, Bogle's been doing a little bit more lately.
Right, and he had a big sack today. Brandon Wright had 2 hurries and a tipped pass today. So those guys did some good things. And Zion Young did in the second half. I thought Zion Young played well. I think he had some teaching points, and I think the point was received on him. He tried to do too much at times. You got to do your job. You're playing against a potential option type stuff, and you got to get that outside. I thought Michigan State was ready for the option stuff when they tried to spring it. Cal Halliday, was right there a couple times, and I thought Michigan State's defense was really, really disciplined. Defensive line, kudos to them, and kudos to the Michigan State offensive line for going up against a 3-3-5, which is something you don't see every day, and not getting not getting tricked too often.
Yeah, I tell you what. happy for those seniors, and some of them might be coming back. But, man, they celebrated like they had just become bowl eligible. And like you said, they deserve it. And like I said at the opening here, just a bunch of college kids enjoying playing college football. And that's nice to see. In the pre-snap read, I don't know if many people read it or not. But in the add it all up thing at the bottom, I said this game, depending on what version of Michigan State shows up, assuming that they are still together, which I had no reason to believe that it wasn't. There were signs that some of it was coming unraveled. But a lot of that's been clipped off, and what they've got left is what they have left. I thought this had the potential to be like last year's game at Illinois, because Nebraska was coming in riding high in a nice record, but really not all that great, individually. Defensively, they fly to the ball real well, play well as a unit, and that made it hard for Michigan State on offense today. Michigan State, like you said, just enough, only 11 first downs. But Michigan State, like that game at Illinois last year, not many mistakes. Hauser, I think, showed some progress. A couple of plays here and there that were nice touch passes. I think the touchdown, there was on the first touchdown drive, there was like a shallow crossing route where he had a lot of patience waiting for the shallow crosser to go through the first window, then the second window and zone at the linebacker level, hit him, catch and run for about 18 yards or so. Just making nice little plays like that. He's not shown the arm to throw with authority and zip it in, throw to the wide side of the field, but he did that once today. Left hash out on a 3rd down and 4, 14 yards. It's not like it was a 21-yard or a 17-yard out, to the far side, but he showed he could deliver that one. Maybe even surprised them a little bit. Maybe the opponent was thinking he won't throw it out here. Well, he did on that one today. And the good thing about Hauser, played better today, 2 factors. One, experience. He started a few games, and we saw him manage the game today and provide some things. The other one, hey, he's a Las Vegas, Southern California kid, and the weather was manageable. Hey, he said at Rutgers it's the first time he's ever played in the rain. And last week, it was cold. It was windy. It was 31 degrees. He's never experienced that before. And that takes him getting used to. Later in his career, that'll be something that all quarterbacks have to learn to do if they want to keep playing in this sport. I don't know how long he's going to go. But I think the weather and the experience produced a better Caden Hauser today. And that was good to see for him and the team.
Well, I think we saw poise from him, and we haven't seen that since the Rutgers game. He was harassed, harangued. It was tough sledding against Michigan. We all know that. And sometimes when you experience that, the next game is pretty rough too. And I felt like it was for him against Minnesota. You can say it's weather related, and it might be, but he doesn't strike me as kind of like the soft California type of dude. He's going to do his best. But today we saw poise. I didn't see him. He hung on to the ball too long a few times, but even on his touchdown pass, he recognized late that was man-to-man coverage on Christian Fitzpatrick, and he just let it go. He felt comfortable with that. But that's the most poise that we've seen from him. The arm strength thing, I just wrote about this a second ago, but I go back and forth on that. The question is whether Sam Leavitt would be a better option against, elite defensive backs or elite defensive back talent, which you will see against, Penn State and against Ohio State. There were several passes in this game where I felt like, even on that first drive, where maybe if Nebraska's DBs were just a little bit better or a little bit more athletic or picked something up quicker, they could have been near interceptions.
You're right.
Against a Penn State or an Ohio State, those are potential pick sixes.
Yeah.
And you and I talked about this as well. Like when you have those scenarios where you can't throw this pass or this route, then it really puts a lot of pressure on you if you don't have a run game. I mean, really, you can't. If you can't run the football and you're limited in your routes that you can throw, I don't care what receivers you have, you're going to be limited as an offense. So the balancing act in my mind for Michigan State as far as quarterback goes, it's do we think that what Caden Hauser did today, it's translatable to like at Ohio State or a Penn State, and I'm not sure that's the case. So he did really well today, and he took a step as a quarterback, and it's an important development for a young player. But at a certain point, you got to wonder, like, is Leavitt just better because he can do some things that Caden Hauser can't, a la scramble, a la, like even on Leavitt's touchdown pass, he did look off from his primary target, and that was impressive. He just has kind of an it factor, and to be honest with you, I think he's just his body and his athleticism. He doesn't play like what you think of as a quarterback. He's got some swagger to him, like like a linebacker playing quarterback. And I think Michigan State, given what this team has on offense might need that against a Penn State or Ohio State.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what he chooses to do. We asked him after the game, Sam Levitt. He's a true freshman right now. He's played 4 games now. The next time he plays, he loses his freshman year of eligibility, or he spends his freshman year of eligibility. Asked him at the beginning of the week, I think prior to the Minnesota game, have you talked about that thing? And he said, haven't talked about it yet, haven't thought about it yet. Now he says he will talk about it with his family, has not made a decision yet. Whether he's going to opt out, stay on the team, and just say, hey, 4 games, I'm going to retain freshman eligibility. That's something that some players have done in both sports, basketball and football, occasionally from time to time. I think it might have been Adam Ballinger way back when he was a freshman. I think he opted out to retain freshman eligibility. And I'm not sure Izzo was on board with that, but he let the player do what he wanted to do. Ballinger got a 5th year, if I'm remembering that right. And Ballinger did not end up having a great senior year, but he had good moments along the way for sure. Won a national championship as a redshirt in 2000, if I remember correctly. Last year, Van Sumeren was a guy that was playing a little bit, shut it down to retain eligibility. Levitt has that question now, and it's an intricate question. They came into this game with the plan that Levitt was going to play quarterback every 3rd series. I think he had 2 possessions today, right? A 3-and-out and then a touchdown drive. So he had mop-up duty at the end of the Akron game, I think it was. Mop-up duty at the end of the Michigan game, looked pretty good. 4th quarter against Minnesota looked pretty good. And then 2 possessions here. So he's never really started a game. 2 of those situations were mop-up duty, Do you really want to... You're probably not going to start next week because Hauser's the starter and you looked okay today. Do you really want to play the rest of, spend your freshman year of eligibility, maybe getting 2 possessions against Ohio State, maybe 2 against Indiana? That's a tough decision. If it were my kid, I'd have to think real long and hard about it and see what the kid wants to do more than anything else. But, hey, these kids, it's a business these days, Paul, and these are individuals, and I respect that that's a difficult decision.
Yeah, my question is, if you're getting paid NIL money, can you shut it down and still get paid? I mean, we don't know those type of things. Those are things that
fair question. It's a business. It's a fair question.
So the other deal is Sam Levitt. Just when he came in here, one of the reasons why he went here instead of Washington State is because he felt like he had a better chance of getting on the field here as opposed to Washington State, where Cameron, I can't remember his last name, but the very good quarterback at Washington State. He didn't think that he would get on the field. So he came here with the intention of getting on the field. So the thing that he's going to have to decide, and Michigan State coaches are going to have to talk to him about, is what the plan is and what the likely scenarios are. Is it a situation where, if a Caden Hauser gets hurt or isn't effective, that Sam Levitt's going to get more and more, opportunities? Is it going to be a deal where it's every other series, every 3rd series? What is that? What's going to be the threshold to make that decision? The other question is if it's not Sam Levitt and he decides to shut it down and he has a hard shutdown, who's the backup after that? Because Noah Kim is not available apparently. So that's going to be a tough thing. I think it'll be a wait and see type of deal. I think Levitt's the kind of kid where I think he feels like if he gets this opportunity, he'll be the guy. So maybe it's a matter of saying, hey, you're equals right now and you can earn the opportunity. But I do kind of feel, going back to what I was saying about Hauser being limited in some ways, I do kind of feel like Levitt's going to get his opportunities against Ohio State and again against Penn State. So because of the limitation factor, you put Levitt in against Ohio State, he's going to play against Indiana the next week. It's not like you're going to take him out, and not play him. So I think they've got to be very, very purposeful about how they communicate. This is our plan for you. This is what we foresee for you if you decide not to redshirt and move forward in that direction.
My guess, I think we may have seen this with Smoker and Ryan Van Dyke. Those guys, there's at one point, after the 4th game of the season, the rules were different back then. If you play after the 4th game, then the red shirt's off. There's a situation where one of those, if I remember right, on the sideline with the helmet, planning to red shirt, then there was an injury, you ready to go? You're in, and the red shirt comes off. It can happen that quickly. Different era, no transfer portal back then. Last year, back then, if you wanted to transfer, you had to sit out a year and so forth.
Yeah.
My guess is Levitt might lean toward a red shirt, and they might go with Hauser against Ohio State and stay with Hauser, but Levitt is right there, and if there's an injury, it might be a jump decision for a week or two. Are you go in or not? I'm just guessing that, and then maybe if they stay that way after Ohio State game, then he might say then he might shut it down afterwards. I don't know, but. In some ways, uncharted territory for a Michigan State observer.
You go back and you're saying like kids are different now. I really don't think that they are different. I think the kids came in with a mindset that he was going to play, and if he gets an opportunity to play, he's going to. The people that are different are their parents.
Yeah.
And but Sam Levitt's a confident dude, and he's gonna, I think he's gonna have the ability to make up his own mind in this situation, and this is a building year for him. He gets a chance to put it on tape. So I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised at all if he ends up playing more snaps the rest of the way than Katin Hauser. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough next week for Katin Hauser with his skill set. He made progress this week, but there's been very good quarterbacks at Michigan State that have played against good Ohio State defenses that have looked very bad.
Good point.
So that poise thing we're talking about today, it's easy to have poise when the protection is there consistently, and the only time you're getting sacked is when you hang onto the ball too long. Mm-hmm. This was much like the Rutgers game where there wasn't a ton of pressure on Katin Hauser. He showed some toughness in some of his runs. I thought he did a really nice job, but it's a whole lot different, when you're getting pressure because protection breaks down.
Getting back to the Levitt thing, another thing that makes that different, obviously, is the coaching situation at Michigan State. With most freshmen, if you're playing for an established coach, like Mark D'Antonio 5 or 6 years in, and he's the coach next year, and you want to be here, right, then you do what that coach wants. You're more likely. In this situation, they all respect Harlan Barnett, but Levitt's not going to owe Harlan Barnett much going forward toward next year. Doesn't know who the coach is going to be. He might be in the portal. And if you go into the portal, would you rather be a sophomore or a redshirt freshman? So that's a big difference compared to these other redshirt decisions we've seen in the past. As far as other things that were going on today, starting lineup, Kari Crump was in the starting lineup. Harlan Barnett said there's a situation where he indicated that players were late for something, a meeting or something, so the entire starting defensive backfield didn't start. So second stringers started. Ade Willie, Caleb Coley, Kari Crump, and Brandon Lewis. Brandon Lewis, a walk-on from the Lansing area. Kari Crump has never really played before. He had a couple of mop-up duty snaps 2 years ago, and of course last year was involved in the tunnel fight at Michigan Stadium Tunnel, and he received the worst punishment, 8-game suspension by the Big Ten. Suspension ended last week. Big surprise today. Played 3 snaps, started the game, played on special teams punt coverage or punt return also. Did not play the rest of the game that I saw in terms of regular snaps, but played the first 3 snaps, got in on a pass breakup maybe or a tackle. That was a surprise. The players seemed to rally around him a little bit on that one. It's a strange season with a lot of strange things. Didn't see that chapter in this story today, Paul, but that was interesting.
What I find interesting is just the whole Harlan Barnett never giving up on the guy. It'd been really easy for someone to give up on Kari Crump, given everything that has transpired. They didn't owe him anything. He's a transfer guy. That's a Mel Tucker guy. But the one thing I've always respected about Harlan Barnett is he has a way to bring guys around that haven't been successful. I go think back of all the guys over the years that started out with some lumps and came back and had really successful careers. I think of a guy like Arjun Calhoun, who really struggled at times. And there's a lot of other guys, even guys that were really good at the end, even like a Kyrie Willis or whatever. He's got a way to get guys ready to play and give them their confidence back. And I think Jim Salgado, the defensive backs coach now, I think he's the same type of guy. And I think the coaching is really good. And I really like, you look at Harlan Barnett and you look at some of the guys that are on this coaching staff, there's a player development bent with him at the helm that's different than some of the other guys. You see some people getting their opportunities and making the most of it. I think Angelo Gross is a dude that a lot of people would have given up on. He's playing really well, actually, at safety. And I didn't think it was possible, to be honest with you.
I would have liked to see that guy redshirt and play 5 years in the Narduzzi, Tressel, D'Antonio system.
Right, and there's a lot of other guys that are, I think have come on. You see wide receivers, like Christian Fitzpatrick. I didn't know what he could do. He done a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Montori Foster, he's come on. And you see the player development bent of the D'Antonio era, and it really has to be that way because there are guys that are being leaving and whatnot, but the guys that are staying are getting an opportunity and they're making the most of it. And it's today was pretty impressive because a lot of guys did a lot of lifting.
And new faces. Jalen Thompson got his first career start. He's a guy the last few weeks has gotten a little bit better. Today, made some loud plays. He's not playing like a freshman anymore.
2 sacks.
2 sacks for Jalen Thompson, including one that for the moment looked like it had sealed the game. Sack, fumble, strip. Halliday recovers it with about 2 minutes to go. Looked like that was the end of the game. Big play for Jalen Thompson, playing well. He was a 4-star guy. He was the least heralded of the big 3, defensive ends they brought in. I thought maybe he'd be a defensive tackle in the future. By Job is a guy with all kinds of quickness, and DePape also with athletic ability and pass rush ability. But in terms of playing the run and the pass and everything that goes with it in terms of accountability, Jalen Thompson from Detroit Cass Tech has come on as one of the best freshmen on the team. And Michigan State I don't know if Jordan Hall started today. If he did, then Michigan State started 3 true freshmen on defense. And he played as much as a starter because those 3 defensive linebackers, they rotate like starters. Essentially, Michigan State started 3 true freshmen on defense today, and the defense did a nice job. Sacks, contained the run, gave up the one long one, but a series of 3 and outs in the second half, and held serve at the end of the game. Defense good today with a lot of young guys playing well.
Jalen Thompson impresses me because a lot of those guys came in with a lot of hype, but to me, some of those guys are combine-type athletes, shirts and shorts type guys, run the hoop in a practice. Jalen Thompson comes from a football program, and just talking to him earlier this week, I was pretty impressed with his mindset coming in. Because his former head coach, Thomas Wilcher, was on staff here, he wasn't able to come in with the rest of the mid-year enrollees, but he worked with a personal trainer, got into that defensive playbook, and came in with a sharp mind, determined to do his best and take advantage of any opportunity that came up. From that perspective, he's very similar to Jordan Hall, knowing that I'm probably not going to play a ton of snaps, but if my opportunity arises, I'm going to take advantage of it. And Jalen Thompson, by taking advantage of the nutrition aspect of the off season, he changed his body a little bit. He's stronger, and he's a smart kid. And there's a place for those kind of guys on a football team. And I don't know what's going to happen with the other guys, by Job or DePape, but I know that Jalen Thompson is going to be a heck of a football player because he's a football player. Yeah. He's not just a combine athlete.
Yeah, he's a team guy. And he keeps getting better and better, and he's looks stronger than a true freshman. He's looking good. Jordan Hall, I saw him today. There was a play defensively in the red zone, might have been 2nd or 3rd down, where something happened in the offensive shift, and he was communicating to his defense emphatically, like he's really grown. That's a freshman that's not afraid to bark and lead and yell at people. And then he ended up making a play over here in the flat on a little dump down, I think it was. I can't remember if that was the drive that they ended up forcing a field goal or not, but that's a freshman showing leadership and middle linebacker. I know that the future is uncertain for a lot of people, but those aspects of this, Paul, we've covered Michigan State teams that have gone through coaching changes or not going to a bowl game, and usually we shift our focus to the young players coming up. Today felt like that. Brendan Parachek getting more and more playing time and doing some good things. Some of these young guys, the 2 quarterbacks, the difference is we don't know how many of them are going to be with Michigan State next year. Maybe a lot of them. Maybe all of them. I don't know. But if you think for a moment that maybe they will all be Spartans next year in the years coming up, Michigan State's showing some good things today. And Michigan State was the more talented team today, and they got it done.
It was a mixture of old and young because you saw guys like Maverick Hansen, you saw guys like Simeon Barrow, you saw guys like this Samac and Duplain on the inside, and Spencer Brown stepping up, and you saw those guys making plays. But there were a lot of young players making plays as well. You look at Terrell Henry, a sophomore. He had one of his better games as a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Nathan Carter, still a young player, sophomore running back. He's got eligibility left. Parachek is impressive. Obviously the quarterbacks, but Chance Rucker had some big plays. Dylan Tatum had some good pass breakups today. So there's a lot of young mixed with old. I don't think that this team could have won this game without the seniors doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the lines. But the fact that they're able to fill in with young talent, that's kind of what made this kind of interesting, because you got young guys playing for the future, whatever their future might be, and you have old guys playing for pride. And
That's right.
and that was a really good kind of mesh point between those two. And Michigan State has made it work. Harlan Barnett and his staff have made that work. But it's a good young energy, mixed with old willpower.
I'm not seeing a lot of individuality and people walking away from the crowd or walking away from the huddle and saying it's all about me. They're banding together. The young guys, the old guys. It's good stuff. Maverick Hansen, he mentioned after the game, he might have mentioned that this week also. He technically has another year to come back. He can exercise a sixth year. The 2020 COVID year doesn't count. And he says he's been thinking about it and he wants to. And a win like this makes him want to come back even more. And he said very humbly, I don't know who the next coach is. I don't know if they'll want me back. But more and more, he wants to come back. He says he wants to lay the foundation for what's next at Michigan State. And if I'm whoever the next coach is, I see that video, I'm like, I want that guy on my team. I don't, that. And then without even looking at film, you want that guy on your team. Maverick Hansen, happy for him today. Sophomore. Did you have a thought on that before I
he's just one of the best young dudes or best people that we've covered. There's always guys out there that the team needs, but guys like Kyler Ellsworth, Drew Beasley, over the years, dudes that are just selfless, will do whatever it takes for their teammates. And he's one of those guys, and conscientious. He wants to bring others along with him. I've got a ton of respect for him. Yeah. And, going all the way back to his recruitment, being patient, taking advantage of his opportunity, and then also dreaming big and understanding that just because he wasn't highly recruited doesn't mean that he can't be a guy. One of the things he told me earlier this week is that he feels like it's special that there's still D'Antonio era guys that are here, because he feels like they were physical, they were tough, and they were overachievers, and they were able to play with an edge that maybe some of the other more talented teams or talented players on their own roster didn't have. And he does feel very strong about laying that foundation.
A lot of them are still starting, too, those D'Antonio guys. Haven't been beaten out. Say what you want about them. They haven't been beaten out. I think 10 or 11 started today. Mangum had the best game of his career, just for a half. 7 tackles, interception, tackle for loss, 7 tackles in the first half, and some forceful ones. Got a personal foul penalty on one, which I thought was borderline. Goes down with an upper body injury. I think he'll be all right. Kind of a extremity situation. He said afterwards he'll be all right. He was well enough to do interviews. Mangum taking it up a level. He's no longer a young guy anymore. Right. Toward the end of his year as a true sophomore, playing really well. Mangum, and then Khalil Majid comes in, former walk-on, redshirt sophomore, got an interception. And had a nice sweep tackle. So that's a guy, I said early in the year, they've got very little depth at safety. Khalil Majid was an unknown 2 years ago. They've not recruited real well at the safety position. He's the next man up, been the next man up earlier in the year and last year in bit pieces. And he went in there today and it didn't hurt him. So Khalil Majid, walk-on out there with 3 freshmen.
He played better than didn't hurt him. I mean, he made it like one of his first plays when he came on the field, was very firm against the run. That's something he couldn't do last year, playing the ball in the air. I thought Mangum, man, I know he had the interceptions, but the most impressive thing to me was where he went Isaiah Lewis or, Kyrie Willis type, full speed tackle in the backfield and dropped a running back, I believe it was. And then the personal foul, I understand why they called that, because that's what they call, but there's no way he could have backed off on that.
No, the guy's sliding, and he didn't really hit him that hard either. Spencer Brown played left tackle today because Baldwin was out with an injury. So Brown, who had started at right tackle, moves to left tackle. Ethan Boyd gets his first career start at right tackle. I don't think it was Ethan Boyd's best game. Gave up a sack once, but got his first start. Maybe he can build on that.
And Brown was back at right tackle later in the game with Ashton Lepo playing at left tackle. I'd have to go back and look at the game to see what happened. But in terms of there was not a lot of pressure today. So kudos to Ashton Lepo for making the most of his opportunity.
I'm guessing they were planning a rotation there.
Yeah, I'm sure they were.
And Trey Mosley missed today because of an injury last week, so that's one of the reasons Terrell Henry got more action. Terrell Henry playing in the slot, getting a lot of attention there. Crowd was pretty good, a little bit late arriving. Students are pretty good. They stayed past halftime, had some decent weather. I don't know, I'm guessing 60,000 or so today, which is a nice turnout. Maverick Hansen said that Harlan Barnett told them after the game the true fans showed up today and the true players played today. So they feel good about it. Last time at Spartan Stadium for the outgoing seniors. Last time we'll be here covering a game, which is strange for early November. Of course, Michigan State's next home game will be at Ford Field in 3 weeks. The backdrop to everything, of course, continues with the coach search. Urban Meyer is out of it now. And everything has gone forward in terms of the second theater. And we'll continue to keep an eye on that with Lance Leipold now on the radar. I'm not sure about the Dave Clawson thing. I mean, technically, he's on the interview list. I'm not sure if that'll turn out, or Dickert, but it's on the list for now. Elko officially is not, but I suspect that'll change. And Jonathan Smith squarely on that radar to get an interview. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that as all those coaches work to provide their most recent body of work, what they're doing right now, trying to win football games. And that's going to be fascinating to see how that all shapes up. I can't remember if I forgot any other coaches. I mean, we've kept an eye on Jed Fish. I've not seen any indications that he's on the map yet. Jason Candle, I've not seen any indications that he's officially on the map, but I'm sure they've looked at him. I'm sure Alan Haller's looked at him and thought about it and been all over his resume and everything else. No insider information here, but it wouldn't shock me if they at least talked to him a little bit as he continues to win. If somebody's at Toledo going 11-1, you want to talk to that guy and make sure he's not the next Nick Saban or something like that. But still, as we get into November, things are getting more serious. Interviews are going to happen. Do they happen during bye weeks for some of these teams? Oregon State already had theirs. Washington State already had theirs. So not sure when they'll squeeze it in, but they're planning to squeeze in some face-to-face interviews in late November.
I'm not saying I'm an advocate for Jason Candle at all. I just want to say that I think it's the whole MAC thing is kind of falling off a little bit. But I think right now, if someone's doing something big in the MAC, it's important to look at simply because the MAC loses so much talent every year. In terms of the portal, so many of those guys are jumping in and going to bigger teams. So I think when you're putting together really good seasons, coaching plays a bigger part in it maybe than in the years past. Maybe it's because you're recruiting closer to home or whatnot. I don't know, but it's something to look at. Where if you're really head and shoulders above everyone else in the MAC, you're doing something right. And there's been a lot of great coaches to come out of there. Not saying I'm an advocate for him, but I do think it's something to look at, given how much of their top talent gets pilfered every year from Power 5 programs.
And we'll see if Leipold can build off that big win last week at Oklahoma. 59 years old, but he is really impressive in terms of what he's done in a short amount of time in Kansas, and very highly respected, top to bottom, what he's done at that program. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. I have a feeling that information could tighten up a little bit as they move forward. Some stuff came out this week, but I suspect things might tighten up here in East Lansing. Maybe information will break outside of East Lansing, but we'll keep an eye on it at SpartanMag.com. Give us a like here on the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Go to SpartanMag.com for $1. Subscribe for a month. Get the coaching search coverage over there at SpartanMag.com as we talk about it all the time at the Underground Bunker message board. Plus, basketball season kicking off in earnest on Monday. Michigan State against James Madison. We'll be covering that as well. Anything else, Paul? For Paul Konyndyk, you've been watching the VCast from Spartan State. And for the last time this year with the Spartans, the VCast, SpartanMag.com.